Hello, welcome to episode 3 of the Byte Podcast. Today I'm joined by Riad Hasan. So, hello, Mr. Hasan. Good afternoon. I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for coming out and helping me with my podcast.
Sure, you're very welcome, Dion.
So, I wanted to start us off with like a few introductions just so I can get to know you better and so my audience can also get to know you better. So,
Sure.
the first question I didn't get to ask, what's your current role?
I'm currently in the role of fractional CTO and I do work mainly for insurance companies. They don't have a chief technology officer, either somebody left or somebody's coming in. That in between period, they look for someone to help them with specific projects. So it's a time bound role, fill the gap. And what I do is I come in and I help those companies. Typically, those companies are like small to mid-size companies. And since my specialty has been mainly in insurance technology, that's how I help them out by becoming a chief technology officer on a what they call fractional basis, which is basically it's not for a 4 or 5 year stint role. It is for a finite duration of time.
That's really interesting. I saw on your profile that it said fractional CTO. So that was also a couple questions I was going to ask you later as well about the fractional aspect of it. So I was looking for your profile, as I said, and I noticed that you've been in the field for like around 20 years, which is an incredible feat. It's amazing. So I wanted to ask you, what's kept you interested in this field for that like much time?
A combination of two things. That's a really good question. So some folks are very passionate about technology. Some folks are very passionate about leading people or working on solutions and things like that. And I like to say that I'm passionate about a mix of everything. So what I like to do is bring improvements to insurance companies using technology. So I'm not a hardcore technologist myself. My background really started off as a very different thing, really. I was a chemical engineer by degree. So my bachelor's degree is in chemical engineering, but I did end up getting a master's degree later on in the management of information technology. And what really drove me down the path of information technology was, one, there's a lot of good opportunities available and I like challenges. So it was a challenging career to be in. Paid well, so that helped as well. And what I ended up doing really brought me close to business and business problems. And I was able to work over the past 20 plus years directly with business leaders and business departments and figuring out what their problems were and how I could help them solve those problems using technology. So in essence, I would work with them and try and come up with solutions to their problems first before going back to the IT teams that I would lead to say, hey, this is what they've got. We've got to solve it by doing things option A, B, or C. And then I'd get feedback from the teams on how we could solve the problem, go back to the business, and the business would say, I think that would work, or how about you try a different way? And what I really liked was the partnership that I could have between IT and the business to solve those problems and solving problems using technology.
That's great. Problem solving is always a great skill to have. It's also like from the two other people I interviewed earlier, like the main skill that they recommended to students my age is problem solving skills. So you're saying now it makes a lot of sense for the future. So that was good. Thank you so much. Those are the only two questions I had for the introductions. So now I want to ask you a bit about like your career and your career story and how you got to your position that you are now. So I wanted to ask for my first question, what was your first role in technology?
So for my first role in technology, you got to go back to a time when I was probably just a little older than you. I was in my first year in college and I was a foreign student on a work study program. And one of the jobs that the school had given me while I was studying, so I could pay some of my fees, was working in the academic computing services. So basically taking care of all of the compute services within the university. So I had several roles in the 4 years I was in college. And those were the beginning of what I would say my IT experience. And I started off first by being proctor in one of the computer labs where I showed people how to use computers, because not everybody had them. Some people were learning how to use them for the first time. And there were no laptops, by the way, back then. So these were all desktops. And then the desktops were in these, what we call computer labs. So people or students would come into these computer labs and do their homework and things like that. And I would help them if they had any problems with printing or how to format a disk, save things, recover things that, frankly, they thought they had lost, etc. So easy stuff. And then I progressed on from there into more a networking skill set where I helped the school redo all of the network wiring in the whole college campus. I helped them put new servers into place. I was all learning through this entire time because it was the first time I was doing these things. I learned how to configure servers, deploy them, etc., test them, get them out, replace old ones, things like that. So very hands-on hardware and networking side. And I started from there. And then after that, I took as part of my engineering classes, took some programming classes as well. So started getting familiar with programming as well. So that's how I got started. And by the time I graduated from college, I had quite a bit of experience, actually, enough experience to get me employed somewhere, on an IT track instead of, I think I mentioned that my degree was in chemical engineering. Never took a job in chemical engineering. I started off right away out of college in an IT job at a company that in Allentown, Pennsylvania, that made their manufacture of industrial gases. Had actually pretty good fundamental technology. They needed somebody to help them with networking and taking care of their infrastructure. And I was one of the few people on that team doing that as my first jump into, I would say, professional IT.
That's pretty. So you mentioned that I'm sorry, I don't know if I understood this correctly. You worked or you helped students in a university like figure out how to use computers.
That's how I got started. Yep. So did you want me to re-describe what that was?
No, I just wanted like clarification if that was like the main thing. That's really interesting actually. So was it like around that time period where everything was new?
It was just coming up. When I graduated from college, the first internet browser came about. Prior to that, there's a browser called Netscape, which was one of the first browsers. And then Internet Explorer came in and they completely drove away that business and became the forefront internet browser back in those days. So I'm talking about like 95-ish or so, when prior to that, there really were no browsers. If you talked about the internet, you're talking about going into a terminal and typing in commands to chat with people, but there were really no GUIs at that point. And the company that was well known for making GUIs was Apple at that point in time. Macintosh 1.0, I used the 1.0 version when it first came out.
Wow.
Yes. And then Microsoft came out with their 1.0 version as well. And shortly thereafter, they made a version 3.1. They jumped from 1 to 3.1. But those were the very early days when people were just starting to use their own personal computers.
You also mentioned that you were pursuing chemical engineering, but then you switched to technology. Could you tell me why you decided to make that decision to go into technology instead?
I think it was a combination of a couple of things. One is because I was working on that degree in chemical engineering and I found it interesting, but I found because I was getting hands-on experience with IT at the same time, not classroom experience, but hands-on actual what happens in real life technology experience, I became more interested in that by the time I graduated. And when I applied for jobs, on the IT front and on the chemical engineering front. And I got better opportunities, frankly, more offers than I did on the chemical engineering side. So I had a choice to make at that time, and that was my choice. I said, hey, I think I like doing information technology better than what I studied and got a major for. So I had to pick something, and I picked one that I liked better than the other.
That's awesome. So as you moved into more like senior roles, like now you're a CTO, but before you were working in a team in, what do you say, Allentown, Pennsylvania? So what changed the most in what you were actually doing like day to day from like back then to now?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So as I grew up through the years and in experience, I first started off really as just like most people do, right? You get some experience, you get more experience, but the experience is really what you have, and you're an individual contributor at that point, which means you have no one working for you, no one directly reporting to you. All of the work that you're doing is really what you can produce on your own. Along the way, I did end up deciding that I wanted to get into management because I felt I wanted to lead people. I felt like I was good at influencing folks and driving change by working with others and in a team set. And I wanted to be a team leader. I'd been a team leader while working in college. Those IT roles that I talked to you about. So in the 4 years when I was working in college and going through the networking jobs and things like that, I did have an opportunity to lead other students, and I really enjoyed leading other students in those college projects. So, hey, I wanted to take that further in my professional life. And I worked with my managers and said, hey, I want to get into management. Give me a small team that I can lead. And I was given that opportunity. So became a manager of a couple of people to begin with. So my management team then saw that I was doing that well and gave me other opportunities, including training to become a better manager of people and ultimately to have larger teams. So I was able to expand my scope over the years from managing people, a couple of people in my team to over 200 people, including a mix of people who are in my immediate vicinity, should I say local, to multiple distributed teams across the country to teams across the globe. And then on top of the people within my direct control, also having contract force, which is basically working with third-party vendors who also had their own resources and being able to direct them as well. So it's exciting to be able to scale from someone who just started leading a couple of folks initially to many years down the road where you get the opportunity to lead large teams of 200 plus, do that successfully.
I would always think that like managing that many people, that would like stress me out. So it's like really impressive how you're able to.
Oh, it is stressful. It is stressful. Mainly because you have to keep on top of what they're doing and make sure that they're doing the right things, right? And that they're doing it right. So these are two very important things that you got to keep on top of, because when you work for a business, they want to make sure that you're using the resources effectively, because resources cost money. And the more money that is spent, the business wants to see value, right? So when you buy something, you want to make sure you got your money's worth. When businesses spend money on IT and they pay people for IT, they want to see results. So the bigger the teams are, the more the results that need to be shown. So you got to spend a lot of time making sure everyone's down to the individual is performing to the level of your expectations, and that it's justifiable to keep a team that big around.
That's really great. So you said chief technology officer, so is it just like, it's not strictly you just managing everybody, right? Do you have like other people who are managing other people like that?
Generally, typically how the hierarchy works is everybody has a manager. So I had a manager, right? So, but I was top of the food chain for technology. So I was at the top, and then I had, depending on where in my career you want to point at, but I had like between 6 and 8, sometimes 10 direct reports reporting to me. And then each of them had about 10 people or so reporting to each of them and so on. And that's how you scale. It's not possible for you to run a shop of 200 just by yourself and having everybody report to you. So that's not practical.
The last question I had for the career story segment was, what's something you learned about leading a team, like leadership, that only came with like your experience specifically?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when I was early in my career, I was very aggressive. I wanted folks to be 100% dedicated and really driving forward and giving it everything that they could. And at that time, I think what I did was I learned over time that you got to be a little more realistic with folks, because some people are going to take some time to do things that might just be a little longer than what you expect, and that's okay, because not everybody can drive 100% all the time. So you got to give people some leeway to, I'm not saying relax, but at least to breathe and then come back to doing what they're going to take some time off. They're going to go do things with their family. They might end up being sick, which is everybody gets sick. But building those expectations that humans are, no one's going to be constantly delivering 100% every single day, every single minute, but you got to be realistic about that. So I learned that with time, and I learned that more so when I had kids. So when you have younger kids, they get sick, and then you have to take time off so that you can take them to the doctor and things like that. Then you start realizing, okay, I'm not able to do some things because I'm having to take a little bit of time off to attend to things that are important to me. And I should allow these things to happen for other people as well. So that was a learning experience, I'd say. Early on, I learned that. And when I learned to, quote unquote, relax a little bit and let people, give them the space, they trusted me more, I was able to connect with them at a little more empathetic level. And actually, in the long run, they stayed with the company longer, they're happier employees. And if you look at the long run, they didn't burn out, they stayed longer, and they produced more while they're happy. And I think that's what it is. You got to strike a balance, make sure that you have the right relationships with your staff and team so that they want to work for you day in, day out.
And that concept of burnout can be like really bad for teams, especially.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you for that. I'm going to move on from the career story section. Those are some really good answers.
Sure.
So I was looking through your profile actually, and I noticed that you had some, like, if this is correct, I saw like patents on your profile. You patented some things. So I wanted to ask you about that process.
So patents two of them were fairly similar. They're for different processes. That was early on in my career. In the early days of my work in an insurance company that I worked at called Genworth Financial. I believe Genworth Financial, before they became Genworth, it was called GE. And the patents were related to a proprietary way of securing data before sending it over the wires. Let's say you were trying to send data securely to a different company, you had to send it with encryption and make sure that at the other end that the receiving company had the decryption keys so that they could unlock the vault and then take out the documents that you were sending to them. So nowadays there's a lot of standardized ways of doing those things, and there's all these there's all these commercial packages you can just buy off the shelf. But I'm talking about back in those days, these processes were not readily available. So we built our own, and it was a proprietary way of securely encrypting data and documents and sending it to multiple companies and have them open it with different keys. And we patented the process using the company's lawyers. A colleague of mine and I created the invention, if you will, and then filed it with our company lawyers and got the patent.
That's really great. I was going to ask you more about like that process, but you explained it. Really curious, how do you go from like a simple idea, like just an idea of something you want to create, to something like actually like protected and like made as like a patent?
So the United States Patent Office, if you go to their website, they actually have a template that you fill out. So let's say you have an idea. So you can patent an idea, you can patent a process, you can patent a product. There's many different things. We patented a product as well as a process. And the idea was already in there, but we didn't strictly patent an idea, but you could if you wanted to. So there's 3 different flavors of patents. But if you go to the US government's website, they're the ones who try to keep track of all the US patents. And then let's say you have an idea or you have a product. You go through their website and you search through and try and find if there's somebody else who's done something similar, right? And if you don't find anything, at least that you can find, you can go fill out the template and submit it to them. And what they do is they look through it and they say, yep, this looks like it's something new. It doesn't exist. Then you get a temporary case number, right? And then it goes through further approvals. And once it gets approved, then you get your patent with the patent ID and number and things like that. But the good thing about a patent is if you're a startup company or you're in competition with other companies, you create something that you think would be of very good value to the marketplace, but you want to protect yourself, your product, your idea from being used elsewhere. Once you patent it, it's yours to be used. And if somebody else wants to use it, they can come to you and say, hey, we want to use it. You can ask for royalties on the usage of that. So you can create a licensed product, if you will, for the use of that idea or process. So that's really what patent is supposed to be for, is to protect your invention from being used illegally and to make some money if you want to license it out as a licensable product.
I think that's really cool, actually, that the patent process, like having a patent too, is just something I'm interested in as well, because it's just like such an interesting thing. You said you could patent. Did you say you patent a process and a product?
You can patent a product. So let's say you come up with whatever. Nowadays, you can come out with an AI product that does something that's different from others. You can patent the product. And if anyone uses your logic or your algorithms, for example, you could take them to court and say, hey, you're using my product, so you owe me money or some settlement. If you have an idea could be here's this business idea, or here's this idea for marketing or whatever it might be. And this is a way to go about it. That would be an idea. Is basically it's you describing what the idea is in a document or in a write-up, right? It would look like at least several pages worth of descriptions of what the idea is, et cetera, things like that. Much like if you're writing a book, it's a unique book and unique story. It's yours. You want to protect that by patenting it or at least taking it to a publisher so that they publish it before somebody else takes that idea. So you can do that. Or if it's a process could be you have a known technology or known idea. It's not your idea and it's not your technology. It's somebody else's, but the way that it's used is different from somebody else. You can patent that process itself. You use something a certain way.
Oh, that's cool. Would it be like if somebody patented a fork, but then you use a fork as a spoon? Could you patent that idea?
Yeah, that's an oversimplified thing. It would be more,
like defying the traditional way of using something.
So for example, for my invention, the one that I did with a colleague of mine, we made the encryption product, but we also did the process that we put into place was we created an insurance portal where folks who wanted to use that technology could come and take the encryption keys from the other side. And so we created that process of folks coming into the centralized folder, if you will, to pick up the keys that were assigned to them and so on. So that didn't exist before, right? But the technology was a separate patent. So one of the patents was the process. One of the other second patent was for the technology itself. So that's how it worked. We said, hey, here's the technology, and then here's how it's going to be used. We're going to send the files here to this folder. In that folder, you're going to have your own specific folder, which only you can get to, and you pick it up from there and take the file over to your folders. So we documented that entire process for how things would be sent, how things would be picked up and then used. So that's how I'm describing what the process is. That's how we did ours.
That's interesting. Thank you for telling me about the patents. That was like a subsection I wanted to create because I noticed that and I thought it was really interesting. So I wanted to ask you some questions about that.
Good.
So moving on from that, I wanted to ask you more about your current role. As you said, you're a CTO, but not a CTO that works for a specific company. You're one that takes requests, I'm pretty sure.
So fractional CTO. So I work on shorter time assignments, insurance companies looking for a CTO for a finite period of time. So I have been a full-time CTO in my past. I'm talking about 10, 12 years ago when I worked several years as a CTO for an insurance company. But since then I've had other roles. And now what I'm focused on is looking at companies that they don't have a CTO right now. Either they don't have the funding for a full-time one for a long period of time, but they need some projects done. And so they want to hire somebody for 2 years and then say, hey, thank you for all the help you've given me. We're good for now. Or they go hire a full-time person after that. So I'm in that zone where I help people bridge the gap between not having somebody and then getting somebody that they want to hire as a permanent hire. So I work as a consultant. So I come in for 6 months to 2 years or so and come and help insurance companies fill the gap of not having a CTO.
That's really interesting. So that's interesting. So you're the term interim, I think it is?
So interim consultant. I've got lots of years of experience, so I'm able to do a lot of different things and help the companies solve some problems for specific problems, because there's always problems. I can help. What I generally do is get in there, do an assessment for the company, tell them what their top problems are, or at least validate what they think their top problems are, and then help them work through those and solve some of the issues that they want to focus on.
So the first question I have for this section is, when you start working with a new company, what's the first thing you try to understand about their situation?
The first thing is really understanding I'm used to partnering first with the senior leadership team. So that would be the CEO and CEO's direct reports. So that would be folks like the chief operations officer, chief financial officer, chief sales officer, those kinds of folks. And the first 30 to 60 days is really trying to understand what all of the different issues are that they have and finding out where technology has helped them so far, or what they would really like to get done, what their ideas are, validating what those ideas are, talking to them about what they'd like to achieve in the future, things like that, and then really helping them validate that they understand what the issues are. So I think that's the first 60 days, so about 2 months worth of work is really assessments and coming back with, I think this is what you guys are saying you need. Can you validate that? And then we can move forward from there. The next couple of months is really about creating budgets and figuring out what and how much it'll cost to make the changes that they want. And then provided that this is management work, right? So provided they want to fund the work that's been proposed, getting the funding itself and then hiring the people that are necessary to get in there, including figuring out how we will get to the solution. So initially we're like, okay, we need this solved. We just don't know how yet. So the third step is to figure out how we would do the solve. Are we going to do it with code? Are we going to do it with just buying a third-party product? Are we going to do both? Are we going to integrate with other vendors who might have parts and pieces of the solution, but not all of it? You talk about solutioning. That's the stage. How are we going to achieve? And then once you figure out the how, then you figure out the timing, which is if we execute the project, how long is the project going to take? Is it a 6-month project? Is it 9 months? Can we add more resources to it, get it done sooner? Should we not do that because we want this to be slow and steady? So getting that right is very important, because some businesses don't want to. You can spend $1 million every day and get something done fast within 6 months, right? Or you could spread that money out over a couple of years and get things done over a longer period of time. The advantage sometimes you got to get it done quick. So you spend a lot of money, but you rush into things that you may not necessarily have thought all the way through. And then there's reworks like, okay, hey, when we were going through this, we didn't really fully think about some of the issues that might happen. So you run the risk of having to redo some things if you do things too fast. If you do things too slow, by the time you've achieved your results, technology has changed and something else has come that does things better. You're like, oh, we should have waited, and we could have done things a little better with the new technology, but who knew, right? So there's pros and cons of rushing forward or waiting too long. And it's a matter of making sure that the executive team that you're working with, the executive team, make sure that everyone understands what the pros and cons are of going forward fast or slowing things down, et cetera, things like that. And sharing with them very openly what the challenges are of getting something done or not. Maybe it's something that has never been done before. And so the risk there is, hey, you got to we're figuring it out as we go. And the risk of figuring something out as we go means we may end up doing things that we just won't use, which means it's throwing away money, right? But I want you to be aware it may happen. So I think that's that step, and really getting the project or the work underway, putting a timeline in place, showing what the budget is and how long it's going to take. And then finally, really, it's every step of the way, making sure that you measure progress and success and show the senior leadership team, hey, we promised that we would get X, Y, Z done. We've done X. It cost this much versus we said it would cost this much. So you're showing them the difference between what you said it would be versus what it actually is, and then getting approval for the next. And it's always communication is very important. You want to make sure that you're communicating constantly. And over communication is, you cannot over communicate. If you said something yesterday and you're saying it today, and it sounds like, who has the patience for that? Really, it's very valuable to do those communications over and over again.
That's a really great answer to that question. So what I understood from that is that you basically act as like, if a company like suddenly loses their CTO, you're acting like immediately, like straight to the point. We're going to get back on the, we're not going to waste any time, that thing.
It's getting them to be well, if they have an IT team and if that leader is missing, they do need somebody to step in the interim and still drive the things that they want to get done. So that's where I come in. I help in that interim period to make sure that they don't fall behind and that they're able to move their projects forward.
That's really great to hear. So I think that would be it for the current role section. So I'm going to move on. I wanted to ask you some advice for fellow students that are watching.
Sure.
I appeal this podcast to students who want to get interested into the field of IT. So first question I had for this section is, I wanted to ask you, what skills do you think like matter the most for students who are trying to pursue a role in technology today?
I think you're coming out with a comp sci degree or a degree in hardware. So let's say you're electrical engineering or computer science. It seems that because of AI and the way that it's coming out right now, it's a little difficult to tell exactly how comp sci is going to evolve over the next few years. But I'm sure as you go through this, if you're interested in computer science, then just know that things will be changing because the AI tools and bots are actually starting to write their own code. I cannot comment on how efficient or how effective that code is, but it's certainly going to have an impact on people who make a living doing computer science. Is in danger of becoming extinct? I don't think so, but I think it's going to definitely change. The exciting front right now is really in hardware. So if you're an electrical engineer and you have a more heavy focus on hardware, not on the software side, I think there seems to be a lot of activity on that front with the focus on compute and storage and things like that. So I think if you're undecided, there's universities out there that a combination of both hardware and software. If you can afford to do that, work hard on that, you can actually get a degree where you get exposure to both the software and the hardware side, and that way you're covered for everything. I think it's going to be an exciting world coming up. I'm not exactly sure where we go, but the old traditional ways of getting business requirements from the business and then giving that to the developers to go develop something, and the quality assurance specialists to go and test something, and then the deployment people to go deploy something, and then the product getting out there. All of that is changing, right? So business analysts now, I don't even know if they're going to be called business analysts, are able to use these AI tools to write the code for them instead of going to produce the code using these AI tools. Or if they have experience with GitHub or other things, they can just go deploy their own version of a tool that they've created. I think it'll be interesting because we're probably going to end up with a lot of internal tools and solutions built by different teams. And sometime in the future, we're going to look back and say, hey, we created so many of these things. Who's going to maintain them, and who really knows how these things work? There'll be another challenge trying to pull all that together and make sure that the owners know exactly what's going on behind the scenes with these things.
That's also something that scares me a lot about AI as well. Like the fact that people like can use it for the next 15 to 20 years. And then like in the future, everybody will forget like these essential skills that they need to like maintain software. It's just really bad.
This is not a really good example, but because the impact is not as high. But back in the day, we used to use maps to get from one place to another. So I used to live down to visit my friends in Atlanta, Georgia, and I'd have a car full of maps. I would pull a map up and say, I'm going to use this route. And then when there used to be a traffic jam on the highway, it's like, okay, here's this exit. Where do I find it on the map? I'm going to take this and come out here and then come back into the highway. So you would figure out a way to detour and come back. But we were solving those using a manual process. And then GPS systems came in, and now I can't even read a map. I've lost that skill entirely. And I think you're right. We're going to lose some skills. So those who do these things for a living will probably not, but the layperson, the general person, will lose some skills or not know the basis behind why some answers come the way that they are, right? So that's going to be interesting.
Another good example of that, I think, as well, would be like self-driving cars in the future. Everybody would forget how to operate a normal one.
Oh, I think I own a Tesla, and I'm convinced that most Tesla drivers don't know how to drive. And that's why they bought them. But there's going to be self-driving cars now have collisions with ducks. We had an incident a few weeks ago where one of these self-driving Waymo taxis collided with a goose.
Oh, no.
Because it just couldn't see a goose walking the street. Now it's a goose, not a human being. But when we have more of these moving around the streets, those things are going to happen. And that's hopefully they're not going too fast to cause too much damage. But you talk about the collision between systems that are making some really important decisions, right? So if we let AI technology makes really important decisions, like should we take a business in this direction or that direction, things like that, then I think we might get into trouble if we don't really make sure that we're managing what the recommendations are from the bots, etc. So I think, again, you can't let it just keep doing things on its own without oversight.
It's something to definitely like look out, especially in the future now. So moving on from that section, I think we're going to move into the closing segment. So thank you so much for helping me and like talking with me on this podcast. Yeah. It was really great to hear some of the insights that you had.
My pleasure, Bihan. Thank you for doing this. This is the first time I've heard that someone in high school is doing like a series or podcast. So I was very pleasantly surprised. And I think you're going to do really well. Keep this up. I think it'll be very informative for other folks. And if you are, I don't know where you shared this, I'd love to hear the kinds of things that you're recording. I'll check on you sometime in the future. And if you need anything from me, of course, or to get a hold of me.
Thank you so much for
Best
talking
of
to me
luck.
today.
Thank you for your time. Take care, man.
Thank you.
See you.
Goodbye.